Hello, welcome to another episode of Her Head in Films. I'm Caitlin, and I'm your host. On this podcast, I share my thoughts and feelings about the films I watch. They tend to be art house and world cinema. What makes this podcast unique is that I weave together my life experiences with a personal and emotional discussion of film. I explore the impact that cinema has on me and why I connect so deeply to it. As I like to say, my head isn't in the clouds, my head is in films. If the podcast resonates with you and you want to help it thrive, Patreon is where I'm building a more connected space for listeners, offering bonus episodes, extra posts, and a direct way to show support for the work I'm doing here. If you want to be a part of that community, join me at patreon.com/herheadinfilmspodcast. And as always, leaving a review or helping spread the word is appreciated. The link to my Patreon is in the show notes. Today's episode is about Francis Ford Coppola's 1974 masterpiece, The Conversation. It stars Gene Hackman as Harry Caul, a wiretapper who becomes obsessed with a recording he's made, fearing it may lead to violence. Caul is a man who listens to the lives of others but keeps his own locked away. The Conversation is a fascinating portrait of loneliness, paranoia, and the difficulty of knowing the truth. There are spoilers in this episode. I love this film. I don't know if I have felt this excited about an episode in a very long time. The first time I watched The Conversation just about a year ago, I knew as I was watching it that it was something very special. I consider this a masterwork. I think it is a pinnacle of cinema. I think it is the kind of film that may never be made again. It feels like everything about it perfectly came together, from the script to Gene Hackman's performance to Coppola's direction to everybody involved in this film. I knew that I had to talk about it, and from the time I watched it a year ago, I don't think I have stopped thinking about this film. It has probably the greatest twist in all of cinema for me personally. I was so electrified and energized when I was watching this film, and I was incredibly affected by it. And so this episode will be a chance for me to dissect and explore what it is about this film that got its hooks into me. It was a wonderful experience. For me, it's sort of becoming a more rare experience. When I watch a film and I feel like something is sort of rearranged inside me. I have not seen a lot of Coppola's work. I still have a lot to watch. I haven't seen Apocalypse Now. I haven't seen the Godfather films. I have only seen this and One from the Heart, which I really love and I think is wonderful. So Coppola is a director who I'm not as familiar with as other people might be. And people may be judgmental of that and think that I should see Apocalypse Now and Godfather by this point in my life, but I haven't. The Conversation is a high point in his filmography, I must imagine, and I don't know if he will have another film that will affect me the way that this one did. So I'm excited to talk about this film. If I sound really enthusiastic, it's because I am. I have been haunted by this film for well over a year at this point. I have thought about Harry Caul. I have thought about the scenes and about what Coppola did in it. And then with the rewatch, I loved it even more. It is definitely a film that I think just grows in power the longer you think about it, the more times you watch it. It is on another level for me personally. And I've been thinking about what is it about the film that makes it so special. I think that it's a film that transcends its era. It was made in 1974, and it often, because it comes around the time of Watergate or after Watergate, it's a film that gets reduced to the themes of surveillance and paranoia, and it's very much attached to that Watergate era. But the conception of this film predates Watergate. Coppola had the idea in the late 60s. So it's not totally a political commentary or product of its time. Coppola made it very clear in interviews that he wanted to focus on the personal and not the political, and that he found the personal aspect of it even more devastating. The murder that we find out about at the end of the film of the director, the man played by Robert Duvall, the husband who is putting his wife under surveillance, who's cheating on him, he's not killed for any kind of grand political reason. He's killed by his wife because she's having an affair. There's this great interview between Brian De Palma and Francis Ford Coppola after the film came out. It'll be linked in the show notes of my episode where I put all my research that I put into each episode. De Palma asks him in that interview, were you a little bit worried that people would be disappointed when the twist came? And when there was no big conspiracy or political thing happening with the murder. And Coppola said he was worried about it, that the film got so tied up with the Watergate era and the surveillance and paranoia of that time that he feels like it's actually more devastating that the murder comes from a personal place. And I tend to agree. And I think it's the personal aspect of the film that actually gives it its staying power and makes it timeless and allows it to transcend the era in which it was made. And it's not just personal because of these lovers and the love triangle that's going on. It's also transcendent for me because of the focus on Harry Caul, the wiretapper. At its core, it's a portrait of a lonely, guilt ridden man whose conscience sort of begins to awaken. It is a story about Harry Caul's inner world, his vulnerability, his growing moral anxiety, the psychic cost of his work, and how he becomes both perpetrator and victim of the profession that he is part of. So the political context is important. It's part of the texture of the film, but for me, it is not its heart. What elevates this film is that it's using the language of surveillance and paranoia to actually explore something much deeper and more personal, which is what happens to a human soul when it is isolated by its own choices. Harry Caul is a very lonely, separate, isolated man. And I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to have certain core themes that I'm going to explore in this episode. And the major one for me is this man's loneliness, this man's inner world and who he is, because I think he's a fascinating character. But he is lonely because it's a self-imposed type of loneliness. There are times when people try to get in there and get to know him, but the work that he is doing is so corrosive that it bleeds into every area of his life. He watches others. He chooses to do a job where he listens. He doesn't watch. He listens to other people's lives, but he has very little direct, intimate, personal connection or contact with other human beings. He invades the privacy and the lives of other people while trying to stay at a distance and to remain unsullied. And he finds that he cannot remain untainted and unsullied by the work that he is doing, by the very dirty work, the dirty, immoral, violating work that he does. And it ultimately corrupts him and corrodes him. And he feels that. He feels that guilt. He feels that conscience. And he also feels the loneliness that is imposed on him because he's not really part of the world. He's only listening to it. He's at a distance, listening to others, eavesdropping on others, invading the lives of others. And then, like I said earlier, he keeps his own life under lock and key. But at the end of the film, he is also invaded. His privacy is also violated. And it's a stunning reversal, isn't it? So, what happens to a human soul when it's isolated by its own choices? And that's what I see in Harry Caul. For me, the conversation is not just a masterwork because of the historical significance or the time in which it is made, but for that emotional and psychological depth, that intimacy, and ultimately that humanity that Harry Caul is doing terrible work. He's doing a terrible job of putting other people under surveillance. And yet he's a very interesting character. He's someone who at times maybe you even feel for or feel bad for. But ultimately, he's making these choices that lead to his loneliness and lead to the dismantling of his life. The film is about surveillance and paranoia, but more deeply, it's about Harry. And so for me, that's what gives it its lasting power. That's what stayed with me in my mind, along with the themes of paranoia, surveillance, and all kinds of stuff that I'll get into in this episode. The first big theme that I want to talk about with the film is the loneliness and is Harry Caul as a character. This is really the heart of this episode for me. I think I could just talk about Harry for an hour or more. There's so much that I want to talk about in this film that I really put off recording this episode because I had so much material. I had taken so many notes while I watched it. It got my mind buzzing. It really just electrifies me when I watch it, and it stimulated me as I was experiencing it for a second time. And I had so many notes, and I was like, how am I going to organize all this? How am I going to talk about all this and bring it together? If this episode is a bit excessive or disorganized, that is why. It's simply because there's so much that I want to talk about, and I want to try to fit it into this episode without it becoming like a crazy, ridiculously long episode. What struck me the most after I first watched the conversation was this irony of this man, Harry Caul, listening to other people and having like a sonic or auditory proximity to other people while at the same time being worlds away from them. Like just this vast distance between this man and the world and other people. And that activated in me a lot of sympathy, a lot of like identification with this character, because loneliness and isolation has been a big part of my life, where I have always felt separate and I've always felt like on the outside looking in. And this is a film literally about that. That he's not looking in, he's listening in. And so he has this intimate access to people. Think about when you're talking to somebody and you think that you're just alone and it's just the two of you, or when you're in your bedroom or you're in your apartment or your house just doing whatever, and imagine if you were being eavesdropped on or you were being listened to. It is so incredibly intimate. And the beginning scene, of the man and the woman in the park is like it's the core scene of the entire film. Everything emanates out of this scene. Everything is set up. They think that they're just having this conversation with each other, and yet they suspect that they're being followed and listened to, but they think, oh, I'm in a crowd. How could anybody be listening? And the idea for the film came from Coppola talking to somebody who told him about like new gadgets and stuff where you can record people from a distance. You can record people in a crowd. These two people think that they're not being spied on, that being in this crowd sort of protects them in some way, but it doesn't. Harry is listening in. He listens to other people and their lives and their intimate moments. And in a way, he kind of lives vicariously through them. And Coppola brought that up in the interview with De Palma as well. Harry lacks that intimacy and companionship in his own life, and yet he can listen to other people have it, and he can experience it vicariously through the surveillance. It's a sonic voyeurism. And this couple, in many ways, represents everything that Harry is missing: connection, attraction, love, a life shared with another person. He has to listen to people have these lives that he doesn't have and that he probably never will have, because he goes back to his apartment and he's pretty much alone, except for, when he sees Terry Garr, and that scene is painfully awkward. You can tell that this is someone who doesn't know how to open up, doesn't know how to be known, doesn't know how to touch in any kind of tender or loving way, and who himself does not know how to love. Because if you really loved people, how could you do this work? How could you even be in the surveillance business? I think it is fascinating that Coppola decided, I'm going to focus on the wiretapper instead of the people being listened to. I think a lot of films would have just focused on the couple. The couple is not the point for Coppola. He's interested in Harry Caul. He's interested in the kind of man who would do this kind of work in the first place. And it reminds me of the film The Lives of Others in that way, which I have an episode about. And I like The Lives of Others very much. I remember seeing it for the first time years ago. And that is a similar film that takes the character who is doing the eavesdropping and the wiretapping and gives that person a humanity. In The Lives of Others, the main character, the wiretapper, is also very lonely, is desperately lonely. And I think that Harry Caul obviously is very similar. Loneliness, I think, for a long period of time really does something to you. And I've lived with it a lot of my life. And so that's why I identified with certain aspects of Harry Caul, of this painful locking away of the self, or feeling like you're never seen, you're never known, and you're never understood. And there's something kind of ghostly about Harry Caul. And I can relate to that too. That when you are alone, you start to feel like you don't even exist. There's not people there to witness your life and to see you in your daily life. You can start to feel almost transparent. And that's why I was kind of drawn to his raincoat a little bit. There's just something about he even dresses very different from other people, doesn't he? And I noticed that in the beginning scene with the second viewing of he's there and we see him, for the first time, and he's in this raincoat, but it's not raining, right? He's so out of step. He's so awkward. He's so uncomfortable in his own body and so uncomfortable in the world. And so of course he's more comfortable not being seen, being in the van, or being in his room with all of these tapes and all of these voices. I'll get into this later on in the episode, but it's very similar to the way that we consume social media now, where we sit in our rooms or wherever we are and we open our phones and we look at all these people. We listen to all these people who we'll never meet. The thing is that Harry Caul will never touch the people that he listens to. He will never be face to face with them. That's why it's so stunning when he has the dream about Anne. The couple is Anne and Mark. Anne is played by Cindy Williams. Mark is played by Frederick Forrest. He sees Anne in a dream and he says, I know you. He thinks that he knows these people through listening to them, just like we think that we know people based on their social media posts or their selfies or what they curate and share about themselves. And we don't. We don't know them. And he thinks that he knows her. And he thinks he understands the conversation that he's listening to when Mark says he'd kill us if he had the chance. That is the phrase that the entire film hinges on. And Harry thinks that he knows this couple. He believes that they're innocent, that they are the victims in the situation, that they are going to be killed, that their lives are imperiled. That is not the reality. That is not what is happening. That is not what is being said in this conversation that he listens to over and over again. He does not know these people. Just because he listens to their conversations and wiretaps them does not mean that he knows them. He doesn't really know people at all because he has no intimate contact with them or connection with them. He only knows them mediated through tapes, through technology, their voices being recorded, and he thinks he knows these people, but he doesn't. I was haunted by that. I was haunted by this man's, like I said, sonic proximity to people, but not really knowing them at all, not really having connection with them or experience with them. And there's just something about that irony of like the voyeur, the one who listens in on other people's lives, is always alone. His work brings him closer to people's secrets, but never into true connection. He can listen to them, but he can't really know them. He can listen to them, but he can't really be connected to them. He can listen to people, but he can't really be part of the world and life. He remains at a distance from it and separate from it. And that hit something inside me. That affected me very deeply. And it made me think about even like my own life and my own relationship to the world, my own voyeurism through social media or through films or through art. I feel like at times I have lived vicariously through art to make up for the deprivation in my own life of the experiences that I don't get to have, or the connection that I don't feel to other people, or the sense of belonging and all of the things that I feel like I've missed out on or that I've been denied in my life. And so at times, cinema in particular has become like this, not just an escape, but a way to experience life or experience the world. But you're not really. Just like if you're living on a screen, if you're living through your phone, if you're living through social media, it's not really living. You can't live through a screen. You can't listen in on other people's lives or watch other people's lives and think that you know them. And it's like the internet brings us this kind of weird proximity to people, or this illusion of closeness or knowledge about people, when in fact, none of it's real. And it's this illusion. And I feel like there's something about that in the conversation. I feel like this film, because it looks at voyeurism and surveillance and loneliness, and this character of Harry Caul, I think that today, people struggle with this loneliness, this aching in their souls for something deep and real and true, and can't find it. I know that I can't find it. Harry Caul is not really even looking for it. In the work that he does, I think he's not able to access certain parts of himself, or most parts of himself. He's very disconnected from himself. But I think that those are the aspects of the film that resonate very deeply today, is that even though we're watching other people, we are not connected to those people, right? And Harry is listening, but he's not connected. And I think there's something very profound about that for me personally. Usually, I don't personally connect to films about men. But Harry Caul is very different for me. Like I said, there's just that deep identification with his separateness, his awkwardness, his inability to connect. And I have to mention Gene Hackman's performance. I should have mentioned it sooner, but he gives one of my favorite performances, really, because Gene Hackman said that he was nothing like Harry Caul. He actually could not understand this character. It was very hard for him to access the inner world of this man. And Francis Ford Coppola said something similar in interviews, that he did not understand Harry at all. He did not get this kind of person. But I think that's a testament to Coppola's genius and his brilliance, is that even though he doesn't really understand a man like this, he still put him at the center of this film. And Gene Hackman was able to bring out so much depth in the character. He makes you feel Harry Caul's separateness and the way that he recoils from intimacy, like in the scene with Terry Garr in particular, I think is a very striking example. He really shrinks inside himself. He's very unknowable, unreachable, inaccessible. You know, she asks him things, she's trying to draw him out, but he can't go there. He can't allow anybody access into his world and into his life. He doesn't seem to want to be seen. He doesn't know how to share himself, and he seems very suspicious and uncomfortable because the work that he does, he's violating other people. He's also obviously now much more suspicious of people because of the work that he does. He's very jaded and cynical, which would reinforce his loneliness and alienation even more because he's been corrupted and he's been corroded by this work. It's a very painful scene with Terry Garr because it's so clear how unable he is to connect. And his loneliness is his protection and it's also his prison. And you see that so clearly. And Gene Hackman just brings out this vulnerability, I think. It's a moving performance for me. Deeply felt, deeply textured. That's why I said this is like a pinnacle of cinema for me. I feel like everything came together, and Gene Hackman was the perfect actor for the film. It would have been so easy to turn Harry Caul into a villain, into someone completely irredeemable. But I think Coppola and Gene Hackman bring humanity to him. Coppola said that he wanted to make him Catholic because of the guilt and the confession. And we see in the film how Harry does have a conscience, that he does feel guilty, that he knows that his actions in the past have caused the death of other people. And he knows that the work he is doing, listening to Anne and Mark, that could also be dangerous. And he starts to fear for their lives. It's not just a job to him, like maybe in the past it has been. Something about Anne and Mark connects with him, and he worries about them. He worries about their well being. So he's not this cardboard cutout evil villain. And it would have been easy to make him like that, but Coppola resists it. I think in a way, the wiretappers are also shown a bit as fools or buffoons. And I think that's a really interesting choice by Coppola. Think about the convention, the wiretapping convention. How wild is it that you would like publicly promote the technology that you're using to secretly invade people's lives? And it's like openly celebrated. And there's something kind of absurd about that, you know, that convention just being as open as it is. It's more honest. And I think it's more truthful to show that Harry Caul and his ilk, they're not like twisting their mustaches and like they don't have it out for everybody. They're not like these evil monsters or something like that. That they're actually like very ordinary and silly and absurd and even stupid, right? I mean, is Harry Caul all that competent? The tapes get stolen, he gets taken advantage of, he invites people back to his like office where he has the tapes and stuff like that. Those are not like the best decisions. And yet, for some reason, he does it. He gets outsmarted a lot in the film. He's not like a particularly successful person or something like that. And that just further shows his humanity and his vulnerability. He's not a mastermind. He's like a very small, lonely, sad man. And I think a lot of the people who do these kinds of jobs are like that. They're not these masterminds. It would actually be easier or more comforting to see Harry Caul as this villain or a stereotype of a villain. That way we could like safely put ourselves at a distance. And instead, Coppola invites that moral ambiguity and he asks us to maybe empathize with Harry or to see him as this very broken, wounded, guilt-ridden man. This man who isn't able to connect, does not have love or care in his life, who is involved in work that actively harms him, and yet he doesn't leave it and doesn't stop. He's like a very complicated person. And there is something unsettling when you watch a film like this and you relate to the main character, where you can find pieces of yourself in this person. It's very disquieting when that happens. At the same time, like I can say, oh, I understand his loneliness or I understand his separateness. On the one hand, I can say that. And then on the other hand, I can also recognize that this is still a person doing something morally abhorrent and egregious and participating in a harmful line of work that hurts people. But I appreciate that Francis Ford Coppola puts us in that ambiguous space. He puts that in us in the gray areas. He doesn't want to comfort us. What he's trying to do is to show us a man in as honest and true a light as possible. Because surveillance and the work that Harry's doing, that's a world of lies. It's a world of corruption and dishonesty. And yet, this film is trying to show a human being in a truthful and honest and real way. And think about the Watergate era itself. Think about what's happened to the political world since the Watergate era and the political era we're living in now, where it is all lies and corruption and nastiness. And it makes me think about how art really should be about truth. That should be a guiding principle of art, I think, is how do you tell the truth about life? How do you tell the truth about people, about the human condition? How do you break through lies and obfuscation and corruption and the distortion of reality that we are living in? What happens when you live in a world of just smoke and mirrors, falseness and fakeness and artificiality and everything that we're seeing now, whether it's social media or AI generated videos and images? What's real? What's honest? What's authentic? Everybody's turning themselves into a brand or a product or showing a highlight reel of their life on social media. What is real? What is honest? What is true? What is authentic? Because I think that's what we want at the end of the day. Coppola strips everything back. By the end of this film, Harry Caul is dismantled. His apartment is dismantled. Everything about this man is stripped away. And all you have are the bare bones of his life and of himself. And who is he really? We don't fully know. We can't ever fully know another person. But I think Coppola is trying to get at something honest and something true. And I appreciate that about the film. He's not trying to make Harry harmless. He does real harm and he's capable of harm, but he's also not trying to turn Harry into a caricature that would comfort us. He wants us to see ourselves in a morally reprehensible character. He wants us to see the truth of this man. And the truth is, Harry is a victim of the world that he creates. He is not just a perpetrator of harm, but he's a victim of it, a victim of this world of surveillance that he is helping to build. He participates in an exploitative and transactional surveillance industry, and in doing so, surrounds himself with people who are cold, who are empty, and who are transactional. He is a casualty of his own choices, his own emptiness. He kind of has that in common with the character at the heart of Blow Up by Michelangelo Antonioni. And that film came out in 1966, and it was a big inspiration for the conversation. Coppola has talked about Blow Up and said he liked the mood of that film and he was inspired by it. And the main character in that film has a very empty life. He's a photographer in London, a fashion photographer, and takes photos of women, and he just has this emptiness about him. And so Harry is lonely, and there's also an emptiness about him and about his life. Surveillance, this work of surveillance, means that his life is devoid of connection, empathy, and trust. And he contributes to that environment himself, right? Because he's participating in this work. everything is transactional. Everything is empty. His relationships with women, his interactions with other men. When you are part of an environment that's built on deceit and betrayal, that is going to inflict harm on you as well. It comes back to him. He can't expect honesty, intimacy, or loyalty in a world where he gives none. So, of course, his life is empty. Of course, he's surrounded by people who exploit, who surveil, and who betray. So, by the end of the film, his apartment is dismantled. He is the one who's now under surveillance, but he is both the creator and the casualty of his reality, of that reality, and what happens to him. So, on the one hand, you can have empathy for this man, but on the other hand, you have to acknowledge the role that he played in creating his own circumstances and his own life and condition. That's such a fascinating part of this film for me. And he doesn't leave. Why does he not leave? He's 42. He's passive. It might be inertia of just like going along with things, just following orders, just kind of floating through life, drifting through life, and this is what pays him and this is the job that he got, and he doesn't know what else to do if this is what he's used to. But he never stops to think about what his work has done to him, what it has taken from him. And then at the end of the film, he kind of has to have a reckoning once he becomes a victim of surveillance himself. And he's on the other end of the wiretapping. He's not the one listening. He's the one being listened to. He's the one being invaded and violated. So, in a way, his story and the film resonates with anyone who's ever worked at a job or done anything where they felt like their ethics were compromised. I mean, there's all kinds of jobs like that, a debt collector, right? Like, there's just different ways in which your morals might be compromised and how you might acclimate to that or how you might put up with it for a job, for a paycheck, particularly now in the world we're living in where people live paycheck to paycheck. And how moral can you really be nowadays at times? A lot of people go along. A lot of people just do their job, follow the orders, do what's expected of them without thinking about the harm they might be doing. And so I think Harry Caul is also maybe a cautionary tale or a warning about what a particular job or a line of work, particularly when it comes to surveillance or something, or just other kinds of professions that can cause harm. Like what's the cost of that work? What does it do to a person's soul? I feel like that's kind of what Coppola is getting at, is what this kind of job, this kind of work does to the human soul. And how do you bear that weight day after day? And what do you become as a result of it? What does your life become? And for Harry Caul, his life is empty, lonely, and sad. And he himself becomes a victim of the very system that he helped to uphold. So it's not just a film about paranoia, it's a film about the lasting damage, I think, of participating in systems that can violate our own sense of right and wrong and morality. Now I want to transition into another big theme in this film for me, which is the dehumanization of technology. And I've touched on it throughout the episode, but particularly that when that technology is used for surveillance. And we are living at a time of increasing surveillance, whether it's the NSA, it's tech companies. The surveillance is part of every aspect of our lives, online, in real life. It's very hard to avoid it. Technology has become a force for dehumanization. And we see that dehumanization early on in the film with the opening scene. When the couple are walking around, when Anne and Mark are walking and talking, they're being listened to, of course. There's actually this moment where we see a person on the rooftop. It looks like they have a gun. Like, it was really eerie to see it because it looked like a gun because he's looking through a scope, but it's actually some kind of device that is picking up on the conversation between Mark and Anne and recording it from a distance. And so I was very struck by how this device looks like a gun and the way that so much of this surveillance technology can be done from a distance. And the further you are from somebody, when you don't have to be face to face and you don't actually have to engage with someone, it's much easier to dehumanize that person. It makes me think about how a lot of military stuff now has been automated, or how they will send drones in to drop bombs, right? And so there's this total like removal of the human being from the process of destruction. And that happens through technology. And we see that right in the opening scene, that the device itself looks like a gun, like the violence of this kind of technology, the emotional and psychological violence of it, that you can wiretap people, that you can listen in on their most intimate conversations. That is a kind of violence. Instead of, bullets coming out of that man's device, he has it aimed at the couple and records their voices. And that is the dehumanization at the heart of surveillance technology in particular. And we are living in a society with so much surveillance. And I think the dehumanization goes hand in hand. There's just something so unsettling when he points that device. People become targets, observed and captured through these mechanical means. And it's all about just getting the audio. It's just a job. That's all they want to do. They just want to go home. They want to get the audio, do their job, and go home. The people being surveilled don't matter. It's just an assignment. And the technology itself is very alienating. It reduces Anne and Mark, this couple at the park, to these disembodied voices, these fragments of sound, completely divorced from their humanity. They're just these sound bites. They're just these phrases repeated over and over again. It's very dehumanizing. But I think what's so interesting about the film as well is that Harry Caul has his conscience awakened, and he starts to feel something about this couple. Perhaps, and Coppola brings this up in the interview with De Palma, or maybe De Palma raises this idea as well, that in a way, Harry Caul is listening to that conversation, listening to this young man, this young woman, and he's almost becoming Mark in a way. Just like when he sees Anne in the dream and says, "I know you," but of course he doesn't, and she doesn't know him. When he's listening, he can maybe imagine himself as Mark and take his place. It's like these are disembodied voices, but Harry starts to feel something for them. He's never met them, he's never had a conversation with them, but he starts to worry about their lives and thinks that something's going to happen to them and that they're going to get killed because of the phrase, "He'd kill us if he had the chance." And that keeps repeating, and we hear that over and over again in multiple ways. And we think we understand what that means. And when he hears that, he feels something for them because he believes that they are in danger. And he believes that the work he's doing, the conversation that he's recorded, could directly lead to harm against them. The other people listening don't feel that same way because it's a dehumanizing job. It's a job where people are just these voices on these tapes, and they're being paid, and they have to do this assignment, and then they go home and they don't care about the people who are being recorded. But for Harry, something does start to awaken. And that's an important part of the film. You're in an industry that is dehumanizing. You're in a world that is dehumanizing. I believe that we are living in a very dehumanizing time. How do you then resist that? Or how do you actually form some kind of care or feeling for other human beings when you are constantly being conditioned to dehumanize them, to reduce them in the world that we live in, to reduce them to, images on a screen, or, when you're out in public and you see people and like think about road rage, right? Like think about how people can dehumanize others just in the course of daily life, or see people as a means to an end, or have a very transactional view of things. It's easy to slip into that dehumanization, or politics can lead us to dehumanize each other. Technology itself is dehumanizing. I mean, it's like psychological warfare, what's happening on social media, whether it's politics or different issues, the voyeurism and the surveillance online as well. So I feel like the film kind of explores some of that dehumanization and how Harry Caul is actually maybe seeing them as human and worrying about them, but he doesn't realize that they are the bad guys. Like they are the ones who are going to kill Robert Duvall, the director. This film got me thinking a lot about surveillance and the erosion of intimacy. It got because I feel that we believe in I feel that we live in a time of massive surveillance, whether, through our phones, through security cameras, through filming each other, through the police, through all of these different avenues that we are under surveillance, that we are being watched. When we are out in public, we are being watched in all kinds of ways. And surveillance, I think, fundamentally alters the landscape of intimacy. The threat or possibility of being watched changes how we relate to each other, even in our most private moments. I think what's very unsettling and scary about the film is that you could be listened to, and this happens. I mean, cameras are very tiny now, they can be put in all kinds of places. You can be recorded without knowing it. Like, that's a big part of modern life now, is that you could be recorded at your job, you could be recorded out in public, you could be recorded with somebody that you're with, you could be recorded in your home. I mean, not to sound paranoid, but I'm saying that these devices, in the days of the conversation, these were big devices and stuff, right? Like now, a camera can be very tiny. Think about meta glasses. Somebody could be recording you with their glasses. There are entire social media accounts of people doing this. Your voice could be recorded you without you knowing it. The government could be surveilling you or wiretapping you. This happens to political activists. So technology has made surveillance even easier. You just record on your smartphone or you record through a pair of glasses. I believe that we need to reckon with this and have a conversation about it, but I can't change it. I can't put the genie back in the bottle. We are under a certain amount of surveillance that is not normal, and we have just sort of accepted it as part of life when it's not. The technology at that wiretapper convention feels very quaint now, right? Surveillance tools are smaller, more easily hidden, more accessible to the general public, more affordable. Phones, smart devices, doorbell cameras, hidden cameras in rentals, everyday interactions like walking down the street, texting, talking in person are all potentially recordable, shareable, and surveilled. This awareness does kind of lead to a kind of low level paranoia for some people, or a very persistent fear of intimacy, or a very persistent fear that intimacy is never fully private. It's like even digital communication is not safe. Somebody could take screenshots of your messages. Like you're always vulnerable in some way. When Anne and Mark are talking in the park, they think that it's totally private. They don't realize that they're being observed, recorded, dissected, and interpreted by total strangers like Harry Caul. And so, do we ever really have privacy? What does it mean to live in a society where privacy barely exists anymore? Everybody shares everything now. We are a society that overshares about our lives, about our grievances, about everything. And it's monetized and it's become content. So the film was made decades ago, well before the world that we're living in now. And it doesn't directly address this. But I do think that after I watched it, this question sort of lingered for me. Like, what is left of intimacy when surveillance is everywhere? How do you trust when you could be watched or you could be recorded at any time? Women sometimes get recorded secretly while they're having sex with their partners. I have come across stories like that. There are entire Telegram channels sharing where men share images that they've taken of women often without their consent. And even if those images were taken consensually, they should not be shared publicly in any way. So, surveillance, particularly for women, is something that we have to think about and be worried about in public places. What does that do to our sense of intimacy with men, with other people, with ourselves, in our lives? It's very scary when you think about it. And so this film sort of made me think about that. I think what's very kind of scary about the ending is that Harry can't find the recording device. He frantically and obsessively looks for it, but that search is futile. No matter how hard he tries, he cannot find it. And so there's like a very haunting, sort of poetic aspect to the ending, with Harry just sort of surrendering, where he's there among the ruins playing his saxophone, right? Like total defeat because he can't find it. The suggestion is there that anyone can be watched or recorded and never be able to find it or stop it. Surveillance can be omnipresent the way it is now, or it can be hidden in places where we can't find it or identify it. And so there's like a sense of helplessness and vulnerability, maybe even like an existential dread. Surveillance becomes this invisible, inescapable presence. But the twist in the film, where we find out that the couple is actually the perpetrators, they're not the victims, they're not the ones being hunted or targeted. They are the orchestrators of the conspiracy, and the director, played by Robert Duvall, is their victim. That brilliant twist. It's an interesting twist because it also makes us rethink the surveillance of the film. The director had put these two people under surveillance not necessarily because he wanted to like control them or because he was like jealous necessarily, but because maybe he was trying to protect himself or he was in fear for his life. So Coppola even makes the surveillance itself kind of morally murky, where it's like you could condemn it. Oh, how could he put his wife, under surveillance? And this is what's so brilliant about the film, is that once you watch it the first time, you have to rethink everything that you thought. So when you thought that the surveillance was bad, well, in this case, it's a form of protection. It's not just an act of invasion or an act of power, is it? It's that the director suspects that these people want to harm him and kill him. And so he's trying to get proof of that. And he gets it through the tapes where they literally say he'd kill us if he had the chance. And so he knows that these two people are possibly going to try to kill him. And so the surveillance is not as black and white as it seems, that he's using it to try to protect his life. But in the end, even though he put these people under surveillance and wiretapped them and watched them and got those tapes, it still did not guarantee his safety, and he was still killed. But I think it's fascinating how Coppola turns everything on its head. We rooted for this couple and we thought that they were going to be killed, and we thought that, all these things we thought we understood the story, and then we find out, no, we didn't understand the story at all. That we thought, oh, what a crime to put this innocent couple under surveillance like this, when it's like, oh, but they're plotting this man's murder, and that's why they're being watched. It also complicates Harry Caul's role in the entire situation as well. And he thinks he understands, but he doesn't. Even the surveillance itself becomes more complicated than we actually thought through that twist. Also, like the phrase, he'd kill us if he had the chance. I love the way that this phrase changes and shifts in meaning throughout the film. And when Harry Caul first records it, it's a big moment in the film. It turns the film into like this thriller. It introduces like this danger and this urgency. And we think that this couple's being hunted. We think that their lives are imperiled and that violence could be imminent, that something's going to happen to them, that they're being stalked by this very powerful and vengeful man, the director. And it seems clear cut, but it's not. It's actually much more complex because the phrase shifts throughout the film. He'd kill us if he got the chance. We take it at face value the way that Harry Caul does. But once we know the twist, once we know that the couple has killed the director, and then when you watch it a second time as well, we realize that this phrase is not an accusation, but it's actually a defense for their own violence. It's a rationalization of their violence. This couple is not running for their lives. They're setting up a justification for killing the husband themselves. So the line becomes this tool of like manipulation and justifying their own crime, their own upcoming crime. We have to kill this man before he kills us. I cannot tell you how much I enjoy watching this film. Like, I just love when a film does things like this, when it's unexpected, when there are these fascinating reversals and these twists that we never saw coming. How at first we worry about this couple and feel for them, and then the twist happens and we feel completely different about them. It's a rewarding film in that way. It's memorable and it makes repeat viewings even richer because these layers of meaning come out and it makes the film even more impactful. And I think this phrase opens up so much, so many things to think about in terms of interpretation and what we can't know at times, or when we only get fragments or bits and pieces of information. Because everything that happens, everything that Harry Caul does, is based on this small fragment of audio that he gets while surveilling these people and wiretapping them. It's just a fragment of audio. And he doesn't realize that his interpretation of that fragment is wrong. And so the film also becomes this meditation on the dangers of only having partial information. That at times technology can only give you so much, can only give you a snippet, a fragment, a little sliver of truth. Like, what gets lost in translation? What gets lost in the process of trying to interpret these fragments? And that is part of the connection the film has to Blow Up by Michelangelo Antonioni. I can't go into Blow Up too deeply because I don't want to spoil that film for anybody. You're listening to this episode because you want to hear about the conversation. You are not listening to this episode because it's about Blow Up. But in Blow Up, a fashion photographer is at the park and he starts taking photos of a couple in the park. And later on, when he develops the photos back in his studio, he sees something in the photos that he did not see in the moment when he was capturing them. He keeps blowing up and blowing up the images, trying to understand what he saw, but he can't understand it. He believes that he's seeing certain things, but it remains uncertain and the truth remains very slippery. And it's such a brilliant film. I hated it the first time I watched it years ago. And then I rewatched it in preparation for the conversation and doing this episode. And I thought it was absolutely brilliant and it really clicked for me. And what's so brilliant about Blow Up is that it really is about the unknowability and the mystery of certain things. And it's about taking bits and pieces of an experience and trying to understand something that you'll probably never understand. That there are limits to what we can know. And when you don't have the full story, and when you don't have all the pieces of the puzzle, then you can't really know. That's sort of what happens with the conversation. He gets this fragment of audio. He doesn't blow it up like the photographer blows up the image, but he hones in on the audio. He listens to it over and over again. And then the meaning of that phrase, he'd kill us if he had the chance, the meaning of that phrase shape shifts throughout the film. And what we thought it meant at the beginning is not what it means at the end. And we didn't have the full story either. and Harry Caul didn't have the full story. And it shows us that you can jump to conclusions and you can make assumptions when you only have a tiny piece of the story. And what you think is the truth is not. And it's all based on what information that you have. At its heart, I think the conversation it's not just about loneliness and surveillance. It's also about perception, about interpretation, about the profound uncertainty that comes with only having these bits and pieces of the puzzle. Fragments do not tell the whole truth. And sometimes when you're looking for the truth, and Harry Caul is, sometimes you can be wrong. Sometimes you can get it wrong, and your interpretation can have devastating consequences. And based on that audio, I believe that, like the scene in the hotel room where the blood comes up through the toilet and Harry imagines the murder of Robert Duvall, the director. The first time I watched the film, I wasn't certain about that scene. But watching the film a second time, I believe that that is created by Harry, that he imagines that it did not really happen because we see the newspaper that says the director dies in an auto accident. So he was not killed at the hotel. Harry takes this audio, this fragment, this piece, and creates an elaborate scenario, elaborate conspiracy about what happens to the director. And it's not true. It's not real. I find that fascinating because we can all do that in different ways. You can take a piece of a person, like a detail about a person, and create an idea of them or create a fantasy about them. Can't you? There are all kinds of ways where this can operate in our daily lives, where we have this certainty about life or this certainty about the way things happen or what is going on, or we think we know the full story, or we think we know about other people, about their lives, their stories. And in fact, we only have one piece of the information and we might be interpreting it the wrong way. And so I find this to be such a fascinating film for that reason, because it's about the seductive danger of certainty. It really challenges this idea that anybody can be immune to being fooled or making mistakes. We're not infallible. I think the film forces us to confront our own fallibility, to recognize that we might not know as much as we think we do, and that we are always at risk of being misled by others, by technology, by our own limited perspective. Think about now on social media with like AI generated videos and images. Think about rage bait. Think about the way lies spread on the internet. But it can happen in our daily lives as well, where we think we know something that we don't actually know. We are all fallible and we can be tricked, we can be fooled, and we can be misled. Harry is fooled several times in the film. He's fooled with this phrase, he gets it wrong. And also when the tapes get stolen, he gets misled and fooled as well. And there's a discomfort about realizing this. People don't like to admit that they can be wrong or they can be manipulated. There is a danger when you think that you're always right and that you can never be fooled, you can never be wrong. You know, Harry takes a fragment of an audio and concocts an entire incorrect story around it. And that is possible for all of us to do. I think it's healthy to say that at times, maybe we don't know the full story. Maybe we don't have the entire picture, and we can make assumptions about people, about situations, and we can get it wrong and we can be incorrect. And I'll also say about that hotel room scene, I think why it is so powerful is that I think it's part of his paranoia, his growing paranoia in the film. Also, I think that when that blood is seeping out of the toilet bowl, I think that's symbolic. I don't think that that's really happening in the film. We see throughout the film how Harry is grappling at times with his role in the surveillance and in the story. the guilt that he feels. Like there's a confession scene, and Coppola said that he wanted to include the Catholicism because he thought that confession was sort of like the original surveillance. And he goes into the confessional and like shares things, and you can tell that his conscience is growing, right? He feels that things that he's done have led to harm. He talks about another surveillance job that also had some unintended tragic consequences. And he starts to feel something for this couple and to worry about them. And that's why he goes to the hotel room, right? To intervene, to witness what might happen. He truly believes that a murder has taken place, right? It's an incredibly unbearably intense scene. It really is, when he's in the hotel. And I feel like that blood seeping up is like, I think it's about how Harry can't keep things under control anymore. I think he's a man who wants to be in control of himself at all times. And what we see in that hotel room is him sort of unraveling, him coming apart, him being hysterical. When he thinks that that murder has happened, he just gets in bed and is like destroyed by it. It's his guilt rising up. It's the toll of the work. It's all the things that he's tried to push down and tamp down. And now it's coming to the surface. Everything's coming to the surface, and he can't control all of it anymore. I feel like that's like what that blood coming up, everything's coming back. There's this horror inside him. I think it's just everything welling up inside him. The horror, the fear, the disgust, everything just surging out because of the guilt, paranoia, and the psychic toll of the surveillance. And Coppola, in interviews, would not confirm if that scene was meant to be real or surreal. And I think that it is more surreal and is more symbolic. And it's incredibly, incredibly powerful. I mean, you think about the blood in The Shining, right? It kind of reminded me of that as well. That blood coming out is like a breaking point or a breaking of him. I think that this job in particular with this couple, with Mark and Anne, it breaks something in him. It breaks something in his life. There is this unraveling that takes place, and that unraveling extends to the end. Like I said, he is the one who comes under surveillance by the very people that he was working for. The hunter becomes the hunted, as they say, but it fits with the psychological unraveling of this man. Just as his apartment is stripped bare and dismantled, so is Harry Caul. And Coppola talked about that in an interview, about the dismantling of this man. He has this internal collapse because of this job and what happens with the couple. And this is an event in his life, like I said, that breaks something in him. And maybe that's also what makes the film resonant. It's like maybe we all have these experiences that disrupt something inside of us, that dismantle us in some way, and that rip away our defenses or challenge what we thought we knew about the world or what we thought we knew about life. It's very humbling when you're wrong about something, isn't it? It's very humbling when you think you understand what is going on, when you think that your interpretation of reality or of events is correct, and then you find out in a very stunning way that you were wrong, that your view was distorted or incomplete. And he learns that. He learns that he's fallible. He learns that he is susceptible to the very system that he participated in. They will come for you too. That whatever you're doing for a powerful entity, they will turn on you. There is no benefit and no reward for it. And you're not safe. Even when you participate in these systems, it doesn't make you safe. And so this film, it's about surveillance, but more than anything, it's about one man. It's about this man, Harry Caul, his wounds, his complicity, and what he shows us about being human in this world. And I feel like, in a way, we kind of go on this journey with him, right? And by the end of the film, he's a very different person. His life is in a different state than it was at the beginning, because we have to sit with this man, with the harm that he has done and the system that he is part of. I think what makes the conversation such a masterpiece is the intimacy of the film and its relevance, from the surveillance to the loneliness to the limits of what we can know and the limits of our own interpretation of things. I just cannot get the film out of my system. Like, all the things that it makes me think about. And I'm sure that I missed something. I'm sure that, like, there has to be there has to be things that I did not cover, even though I went on for a while. Harry just got under my skin because there's something so tragic and something so reprehensible about this man and the harm that he does, not only to others, but to himself. You start with, I think, some sympathy for him. He's a bit pitiable and relatable, but it becomes much more complex with his own complicity, because his isolation is tragic due to the fact that he's the cause of it. He's the cause of the loneliness. He chooses it, and he continues to choose it because his line of work fundamentally destroys connection and destroys his ability to trust other people. And while I can sympathize with him or feel for certain things about Harry, I also don't excuse him or the work that he does. I can see him as human and also be repulsed by the work that he participates in. And so ultimately, that's the heart of the film for me. It's about surveillance, about technology, paranoia. I love the parallels with Blow Up, the way it makes us think about how we interpret things and what we can know. But I think at the end of the day, the heart of this film is Harry Caul. And I think that that's what haunts me the most. And so I love this film. I hope that this episode was of value. If you ever want to reach out, you can always email me at herheadandfilms@gmail.com. If you liked this episode and you want to tell me anything about what you feel when it comes to the conversation, you definitely can do that. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, keep watching great films.